Welcome to the IMM Friday Flash Talk, anchored by Govin Whittles.
The reason why that responsibility was taken away from the Hawks is not yet known.
With marketing enthusiast Terasai Moffat.
To have a return on sales, you need to have posts that are going to be engaging.
Brought to you by the Institute of Marketing Management, South Africa. Good morning and welcome to another installment of the Institute of Marketing Management's IMM Friday Flash Talks with myself, Govin Whittles, Terasai Moffat, and today we have a special guest who is an expert in the field of marketing research and also looking into the future of researching with an African perspective. This is the IMM Friday Flash Talk, the platform where we venture to give you expert insights, opinions, and look at the trends that are dominating the marketing industry. We hope that you find the conversations here useful and that you'd share them on your social media pages. Make sure you share them on TikTok, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn, where marketers always have robust discussions. We really enjoy hearing your feedback, and we do take it into consideration. And it informs some of the conversations that we have. And today we really hope that you'll find it beneficial because research is so important to marketing. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mpho Mpofu. She is from Masutane Consulting and is really an expert in the field of researching markets and looking at how it's evolving and how best we can capitalize on it. As usual, I've got Terasai Moffat with me. She is the MD of Gateway Synergy, a marketing guru, someone who will help us guide the conversation towards marketing. Mpho, it's great to have you with us, and it's over to you. Tell us a little bit about researching in the heart of Africa and how marketers can use it more wisely.
Okay, thank you, Govin, for that opportunity. And I think before I answer that question, I just want to give some context as to what puts me into this position today. So I am an entrepreneur, the founder of Masutane Consulting. I also work as a mentor. I think that's my primary love, working with institutions like yourselves, the Gordon Business the Institute of Gordon Institute of Business Science, and I work with a lot of incubation programs. I work as a facilitator, as a speaker on market research specifically, and I'm passionate about making market research accessible to small businesses. I'm a qualitative research advocate. So within the market research umbrella, there is a very niche space which looks after consumer insights. And within that consumer insight space, we specialize in qualitative research, which is really the heart of the consumer, the area that focuses on the consumer truth. And that's where the brands must live, and that's where marketers need to live in the consumer truth so that they can create that resonance and intimacy with the markets that they operate in. And I think as a qualitative research advocate, I'm a founder of two organizations, the Masutane Academy, which looks after market research education for both small businesses and for researchers across the continent. And then Qualco Lab, which looks after the qualitative research industry issues as well, such as the future of qualitative research within the continent and how we can leverage the ever-changing African landscape to get greater insights that can help brands grow and move forward. So with regards to qualitative research really and how that can be leveraged and, especially within the African perspective and how qualitative research needs to be working together and very closely with marketers. I think because the African continent first and foremost is changing at such a rapid pace because of things like technology, a younger demographic. So there's a lot of psychological shifts that are taking place. We're getting a lot of pressure from business for immediate results, for continuous engagement, to help strategize, to say, how do we build meaningful brands that can resonate, that have longevity in markets where attention spans are diminishing, and also considering all the cultural diversity that we have on this continent. Over 2,000 languages. What is the role of localization? How do brands leverage that? Because we do know that the more localized the brand, the loyalty it gets, because it builds greater intimacy, it builds stronger relationships. Consumers feel a little bit more acknowledged. They see that as a partnership rather than being led. And all those things are starting to matter within the African context. And it's not just about marketers and businesses. It also means, okay, how do we as researchers approach how we engage these consumers? Because the methods of yesterday are not necessarily the methods of today. And that's been really, really topical for us in the qualitative space, especially at our conference that we've just recently had, titled Dare to be Brave. Asking us researchers to be brave in how we do our work, and actually how we strategically guide brands to be bolder and to be more African, and authentically so.
We'll get into some of the discussions that were had at the conference, which are really very interesting and important to consider. I'd like to bring in Terasai. Terasai, what's your opinion right now of how research is being approached when considering campaigns?
Research is playing an even more pivotal role at the moment. The reason being, it's affecting the frequency of which consumers are purchasing the products. It affects your distribution channels. It affects your sales strategy. It determines what kind of product you are placing where, because do you know the consumer within that territory, or is it a blanket understanding? This market, this audience, this is what people are buying, or is it detailed in the sense that you understand that people have different preferences? What is their proximity and closeness to your product? So you need to have all those data points to understand, where is my consumer? When they walk into a retail store at X, can they access my product at the next retail store at Y? Why are they buying that product? Is it a brand perspective? Is it a price perspective? Is it the size of the product? It's becoming more and more important to understand the consumer, and that can only come through research.
Well, I hope that as the research evolves, it means that more people are getting access to it. But I do note that at the Dare to be Brave conference, one of the topics that you discussed was access to qualitative research. And Mpho, you mentioned that people happen to come across it, not that there are formal channels available, which is kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, it's really, really bizarre. I think what's even more bizarre, that it was a topic at the conference. People still talking about, you stumble into research, and consumer insights specifically, even worse, things like qualitative research, which is so niched. And we not know, right? But the issue is that we're not making an effort to be known. We've stayed niche, we've stayed small, we stayed exclusive to corporates, which is, again, very bizarre when entrepreneurship is at the heart of Africa. It's one of our lowest hanging fruits in solving problems. And it's not accessible even there. So it's not accessible to young people as students. It's not accessible as well to entrepreneurs. So these are the significant shifts that we need to be making as an industry, to say this is not something that should be exclusive to corporates, to enjoy and continually optimize their services, their products, their relationships with consumers. And it's something that small businesses can't access. But also at the same time, young people don't know how to get into this industry and how to even study for it. So there's a lot of work for us to do, but we've made inroads, and I think I think we're on the right track now.
So where do you find qualitative research right now? What do you do if you're a corporate? What do? You sign someone on to do it for you?
So corporates have got consumer insights departments, and these consumer insights departments or even research departments will look after all the research needs of the organization. So it will be anything from anything within the quantitative scope and all the way across the qualitative scope, any media research, any research that is required for the business to function. And the consumer insights departments are actually our clients within the consumer insights space, and whether we're in qualitative or quantitative research. The consumer insights department, though, their clients are the brands and the marketing teams. So they will come with the brand problems or with the brand opportunities and say, can you take this into research for us? And because we want to try and understand this particular problem or to explore this particular opportunity. That then gets briefed out to us, and then we will propose through whatever methodology. So there's a number of methodologies. There's two things that are facing us now. Corporates, because of the market dynamics, the pace is so fast and things are changing so quickly. We no longer have the luxury of the depth. Qualitative research is anchored in depth, in time, in understanding, in observation, in immersion, in observation, listening, right? And really getting, we must come in as a blank canvas and absorb and understand. And that takes time because you need context. And which is great. Brands need that so that they can really build meaningful brand for foundation. That's important. But as in the journey of brand development and just product innovation in general, there are just those quick solutions that are needed, whether to springboard ideas or to just drive the strategic direction for that particular meeting, or to launch a product into the market, or to think about. So there's quicker solutions that are now required that qualitative research traditionally wasn't really geared to do, to have that level of agility, because it was very much anchored in depth. That has been the big challenge, to say then, how do we pivot from that? So on the one back, technology has come into play a big part. And we know the tech-savvy consumer within the African continent, especially the younger demographic, they're living on their phones. How are we leveraging that? WhatsApp, even social media, to gather data. They're always on social media. People are always on social media. We know that they're looking at broadsheets. We know that they're talking on Facebook about shopping. They're posting, they're wanting comments from other consumers about products. It's all there. On-demand research. How can we leverage that? Again, how can we leverage on-demand without losing the authenticity, the granularity, the texture of the information, the human truth? Video, right? So much video, and people love videoing themselves. It's things that are there. It's low-hanging fruit. So we've had to really think about, how do we leverage just things the way things are, and using that for on-demand research. So that's one direction that we're taking in terms of methodology. But the other one, again, is the context, because I think it does happen when quick decisions are being made, because we're keeping up with a very fast-paced consumer world and a product world, and yet the context is wrong. And in those situations, then they backfire. So that depth is important. So going back and having those focus groups and having those consumer immersions and being in market and doing those ethnographic components of understanding how, especially Africans, we're very complex, we all Black, or we all this, and we all speak this language, but within that, we all so nuanced, right? So there's always all these dynamics as Africans that are just unique to us, that we always need to be paying attention to, because when brands get them wrong, it can be very detrimental.
Just considering the low-hanging fruit, it's clear that the research has developed quite a bit. over the last few years. Teresa, you do a lot of work across the continent, and you have the unique perspective of seeing how different countries or brands in different countries approach research. Have you noticed a difference in different parts of the continent, or would you say that the approach to research is largely developing at a parallel rate across these countries?
It varies, to be honest. There are some countries that are developing at a faster pace than other countries. And a lot of the countries rely on past research. They are not investing enough in current or present research to be able to. So there's certain biases, which is, I think, something Paul will probably touch on and touched on in our article. There are certain biases that as brand managers, they have in assuming that in this territory, in this region, this is what is ideal. But as Mpho mentioned, there's a lot of changes that are happening within the market at such a rapid rate. So the cost of research can be very expensive, but at the same time, companies have to get a return on investment. They do have to push sales. They have to justify the cost of that. So there are different ways in which companies are doing it. Some are doing it using their own sales reps. Some are using their own retail departments to feedback. Some are trying to do surveys on their own. Obviously, using an expert is always ideal because they are on the ground, they have a bigger footprint, they have a bigger footprint margin, but companies are faced with the cost. I mean, we've had supply chain disruptions, we've had COVID, we've had losses, profits. All of that factors are playing a role in how much companies are actually investing in research.
Teresa, how common is the presence of a consumer insights department? You work with big brands and small brands. Do you see those departments everywhere, or you think it's a luxury?
Yeah. It's definitely there with big companies. There's no way you can be a key stakeholder and not have that within your organization. It's not it's a luxury for entrepreneurs or medium enterprises as they are starting up, but it is a key department that is needed. Otherwise, you will never grow your medium enterprise to the same level as those key stakeholders without that information. So it's either a case where corporates need to support entrepreneurs and share their research at a low cost or no cost, if that's possible, but who covers that bill? It's always that question.
Especially if you've paid a lot for it. And I think that's why, Mpho, this conversation would be so helpful, because you not only talk about the importance of proper research, but how to approach research in an African setting. And I think that the article that you sent out or is going out is sort of a cheat sheet for those people who don't have those consumer insight departments. So let's look at some of the things that you consider when conducting nuanced research, which is tailored to, say, the African consumer mindset or market. It's obviously very important to consider cultural diversity, but you could go through the ones that you think are really important for marketers who are watching this to keep top of mind.
Yeah, I think, localization is also something that has also been treated as a niche, which is, again, it's bizarre. Because you think about how global brands or international brands, how they curate their brand identity on this very essence of nuances, customizing to French culture or, Spanish culture, because of the importance of localization. There is no cookie cutter approach or one size fits all. But in Africa, there seems to be, kind of an exception to the rule. Oh no, we did this campaign in India, I'm sure it will work here. We just want to translate this. We did it in France, it's going to work here. And why we being called to be brave, why this particular topic was so important is because our work gets filed, right? It becomes a tick box because strategically at a global level, the decision has been made that this is the direction that Africa is taking. So the local teams will then say, but this is not the right approach because in Africa, da, 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 da. And then they call us in to say, can you do an independent piece because we have to motivate to global and say this is not the right strategic direction. And almost over 70% of the time, local teams fail or get overridden, right? Global always wins because the priority rests with the shareholder. We all, the entire value chain, we are accountable to the shareholder. And it's difficult. Localization is expensive, right? It's a problem to the bottom line. In the same way that research is a problem to the bottom line because it's expensive. So you think about 2,143 languages, I think. I'm not good with numbers, but I think that's what Ricky said. That's how many languages we have, right, on this continent. And what does that mean for a brand? You know, and which one do you choose? And, you know, it gets a little bit complicated. And then it's something that gets parked and gets shelved. But you look at today's culture and today's ways, just within young people themselves. You know, at my age, I struggle sometimes to be in conversations with my nieces and nephews because I don't know what they're saying. They've got a completely new language. So it's not even cultural. It's dynamics around age. Hello, can we talk about gender and gender identity? Sexual identity. I mean, let's leave African culture, all these nuances and shifts that are taking place. So then it becomes important to say, what is the brand about? What does it stand for? And what is the long-term strategy for this business? And how do they want to grow into this African market? So then the conversation around localization becomes really, really important to say, actually, South Africa is not the same as Kenya or Nigeria. And even regions within Nigeria are not the same. There's a language called Ispitori. It's become a thing now. You know, it's a language. And it's a consumer language. So if you're coming into Pretoria as a brand, alcohol brand, or, you know, and you are not engaging at that level in that language, in the codes of the streets of Pretoria, you're not going to cut through. So for me, localization is really important, not just as a consumer connection platform, but I think as a way to start anchoring the African consumer story within brands and marketing departments. Again, saying it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, and even if there's acknowledgement of a language, it very often just becomes about translating a French campaign into a local language and then hoping it lands here, which can become very insulting. Teresa, have you seen big wins with localized campaigns and or the converse? Have you seen a big flop with a campaign that's done on a global level and put into South Africa or another country? Without naming shaming, we'll spare them for today.
There's a lot of those. You know, you can always go into, okay, without naming any African ones, let's say it like that. But there are brands, for example, that have launched in Mexico, a car brand, and the translation of that car brand was to say that it does not work. So they rolled out all executions, distributions, everything, and they had translated it, direct translation, and made it so that it says this car does not work. So how do you launch a whole campaign? The expense of recalling the campaign and all of that, simply purely because you assumed you could do a direct translation into the country, but in essence, you were saying your car doesn't work and you're hoping sales are going to pick up. So, you know, there's certain things like that. We have the great chicken companies that have launched in China. And when they launched in China, they said that their chicken raises people from the dead. so as the direct translation, and ran with that campaign. And we know how sensitive Chinese are about ancestors and their gods, and then you come in with that. So there is a lot of research that needs to go before you launch into another country or you launch into another territory. There are many cases locally and in Africa where companies have failed, and there are some companies that have won. It's not as simple as just putting a song or a jingle or a voiceover and sending it out into the audience. But I just want to touch on something that you mentioned, which is in regards to research, because what brands are finding is they want accuracy in terms of the research to say, I want to know that my consumer walked into the shop, and because of this direct relationship or research factor, or their mood at their time, or their feeling at their time, or what was happening within the society at that time, it influenced their purchasing power, or it influenced them buying specifically. That's how geo-stamped brands want their research now. They want the geostamp of the images to say it happened in this area, in this territory because of that, which builds into the whole AI factor and how we are supplying the data sets to AI and to the research mechanisms and technology to tie in all the research into how we penetrate the market. So I don't know if you've come across that, Mpho, in terms of using data stamping, geo-mapping, geo-images, etc., to cognitively affect the consumer purchasing power as an outcome of the research.
Yeah, I think on-demand research is the buzzword now. As it's happening, when it's happening, what is the feedback, and how can we optimize that value chain within that time frame? And I think that's also been one of the major shifts. It's a very uncomfortable conversations for qualitative researchers, because they are people. They're the barefoot hippies. And it's all about the social sciences and humanity, and human centricity was a big topic again at Dare to Be Brave, to say, with the demands of brands and product innovation on the one side, which is about agility and preservation of the human truth, what's the role of AI? So AI can or cannot be a dirty word within qualitative research. There's two schools of thoughts. And I think the conclusion is that how can we leverage, because I think the interpretation and understanding of the human sciences still rests with the qualitative researcher. And that's where we experts, and then decoding that information to say, how do we apply this to brand strategy? And these are things that we need to kind of guide AI into sort of giving us very fast and precise, but also rich data sets of information. It's a bridge that traditional qualitative researchers and modern researchers are having to cross. But absolutely, I think AI is so critical. On-demand research is a necessity, because we need that level of accuracy, so that we can then guide brands into how do you manipulate a certain environment in your favor. And I'll give you an example. Even with geolocations, the mapping, the imagery, we including video, we including voice, all of that in real time. Having consumers actually inside a retail environment, having that shopping experience and engaging with all the different stimulus that they're experiencing, and how it's just kind of impacting the way they're navigating. So that journey mapping, and you look at that decision-making process, they come in with a predetermined decision-making process, because most of the time they would have had a list, or they've got an idea of, I'm going there to do this and that, and this is kind of the direction when I'm going. But there's something that happens in the environment what is it? What are those cues and how those cues decoded, and then how do they drive switching, or how do they confirm a purchase? So again, it's where we've got to be. And I think especially with things that are happening, live launches, product ideation, limited editions, all of those kind of things, we need on-demand research so that we can continually optimize as we're doing and leveraging that information in real time.
It's obviously not exempt from the development in technology, right? But what we're really talking about here is localizing qualitative research. And firstly, I just wanted to get your opinion of it, Mpho. Do you think that more of it is happening, or is less of it happening?
Look, so COVID opened up this whole world of online research, right? Which was really great. But it had a lot of challenges. I think the online research did enough of what it needed to do for the period that we needed it for, getting through COVID. Because immediately after COVID, then we started dealing with load shedding. So you can imagine the impact of that on online research, just trying to engage with people from LSM 4, 5, 6, 7, just using online research. So there's those complexities. So for me, we have to leverage those traditional African values, community and relationship, which is what traditional research, qualitative research is about. It was about a partnership between, the qualitative researchers in the middle, bridging the gap between boardrooms and the community. So the researcher can't do that without the relationships within the community. And those that are in the community become the cultural experts to us about the community, so that we've got a sense check of our contextual understanding. So this is about protecting consumer truth. That's how it's been traditionally. But again, we've got this pressure of agility, even globally. So QRCA, that's in the United States, AQR, that's in the UK. Those are big organizations around qualitative research. And in all the conferences in the past 3 or 4 years, agility has been the thing. Things have got to be fast, and things have got to be now, and things have got to be cheap without losing the depth.
So what stuff is because you can never have real quality when you've got it quickly. So what do you end up losing?
The community, the relationship, the depth, the authenticity, the context. And for me, to not have things lost in translation is important, right? Because it comes back to the issue around localization. And that's why every project is going to be looked at in terms of its own merit. What are we trying to achieve? Is this a long-term goal, or is this a short-term goal? So the way that we interrogate briefs has become more complex because the methodology matters, right? If we are building a brand and we're talking about pillars and foundational elements and contextual stuff, we have to go for the depth. We can't compromise. But I think if we are ideating, and we're going through a process and we want to channel our thinking and guide strategic direction, we then can go for the agility direction and then leverage things like technology. But yes, the community and relationship and the depth, it does get compromised.
Terasai, do you see, like, when you hear that you lose authenticity in the community, how much of a loss is that to a brand launching, first of all, a campaign, and then secondly, just trying to maintain their presence or move a certain product?
So it affects it. Mpho is spot on. She is spot on with that, because there needs to be the passion, the brand, all of that used to come into play traditionally, because you understood who you were talking to and what you were selling to them. And with the quick turnaround times, that all gets lost, and that all affects the return on revenue. It affects the relationships you have, even with your supply chain. It affects your placement. Mpho is spot on with that one. That's exactly what I can say. And brands need to come back to the heart of what consumers want. The heart is missing in a lot of the qualitative, of the quantitative. And what Mpho is communicating is that brands need to come back to the heart of the qualitative, because once you can do that, you can align better, understanding who you're talking to, even from a business to business level, not just business to consumer. People do business with people, and it comes through partnerships and relationships, and those take time to grow. So it's how do you grow those with the information that you are provided?
Yeah, I think as a consumer, you do identify more with the brand once a big shopping retail chain announces that, look, these are all our farmers, they're local, they're from around here. Or when you see a big fast food chain completely invested in local perspectives, that you almost forget that this is an international chain which has different campaigns in different parts of the world. But do you think, Mpho, it's easier for small entrepreneurs or guys that are just starting, guys or women that are starting their brands, to invest completely in localization when it comes to marketing, and that it's harder for big brands to do so?
Yeah, I mean, the small business is really primed for taking advantage of all of the space, right? Because they can make the decisions much faster. But I think they also can, they in a position to create that very personal engagement. I want to speak about this idea around, aspiration and identity of African consumers. I think that's a really significant shift that brands can't ignore. And it talks about African consumers now are having an expectation of a partnership with brands, a co-creation journey with brands. I mean, we've been seeing it since COVID. There are just brands and categories that were not impacted. Instead, they went the opposite direction. They grew. And these are premium brands in markets or in market conditions that were dire for consumers. I mean, really, really difficult to fathom, to say, how does a brand like this in market conditions such as this thrive? And now when you get to the heart of it, that the particular brand has transcended the relationship of a consumer and product. It's gone beyond that. It's gone into identity. It's gone into culture. So when this consumer consistently engages and will put money away and make sacrifices because they want to have this brand, it's not because of what the product is going to deliver. It's transcended all of that, right? And what builds that relationship? It's this understanding of what is happening with the psychology of this consumer. And I'm going to give a classic example, like Nike with the Just Do It campaign. But I don't know if you remember the one that they did with Caster Semenya. I think I spoke about it. Because that was a very unique one, because they took that period when Caster was fighting for her title. She was going through that case. And there's so many layers to the Caster Semenya story that young people identified with, right? And the message in all of that was to say, hey, it doesn't matter. You can do it. And really just do it. Gave young people agency. And it wasn't young people from Europe or from America. It's young people from Africa. And that is important. And we saw that brand persevere, right? Resilient through it all. If anything, it grew. And when you check with young people, it's a heart conversation. It's not a product conversation. It's way deeper than that. And so it matters. And that's why that question of, is this a long-term thing or is this a long-term goal? What are we trying to do here? What are we trying to build? That's very important. And I think brands, again, the one size fits all is not going to work because of these very significant psychological shifts that are taking place. African consumers want agency, they want to co-create, and they are expecting brands to be accountable and to be difference makers in communities that they are part of. So, they're demanding way more from brands now.
Look, there's so much that we've gone through. I think all of this has been really enlightening, and I do think that marketers will look at this and realize the value of qualitative research. I'd just like to go back to one question that I have from what you'd said earlier, is that 70% of the time when a global campaign is imposed and the local team pushes back to say it doesn't work that way here, they lose. Terasai, I mean, what do you think of that kind of statistic? And then Mpho, why are they losing? How can they win? Because I think a lot of them would have lost and they'd be watching this IMM Friday Flash Talk and hoping that you'll tell them how to win next time.
I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that it depends with the country that you're operating in as well. If we look at it business-wise, you can't have your eggs in one country anymore, especially in Africa, because of the nature in which we are now becoming one African state. Not one African state. Yes, we are still individuals in their state, but under the AFCFTA, and when we talk about the population of Africa being 1.4 billion in the next couple of years, etc., we are looking at Africa becoming one nation. So you can't have your eggs in one basket and say business will only be done within South Africa. You need to look at Zambia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Malawi. So even your strategies need to be looking into those markets, and your business growth needs to be looking into those territories, whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you are, a company. So in terms of localization, are you localizing for Africa, for South Africa? Are you localizing for Kenya? Are you localizing for Malawi? Those are some of the things that you need to consider when you're doing that in terms of your brand. And it's also expensive to localize per each territory because, for example, I recently worked on a campaign where the product was a bottle. And in each country, the products are different. So each country needs its own bottle to be shown within that campaign. That's an expensive exercise. So now when you take in, obviously going over and above that and going the extra extent of localizing it even further, it becomes a budget conversation. Is global companies or local companies prepared to pay the cost of that? Do you go and shoot in each region and have your campaign and your billboards adapted to each? Or do you shoot in South Africa and then roll it out, or shoot in Nigeria or shoot in Uganda and then roll it out across? How do you make it so specific? And those are the conversations that local channel managers would have to engage with and justify the cost to say, why would you spend that much money on this campaign for that reason?
Yeah. I fully agree with that. I've spoken a lot about this within Qualco Lab, and even at the previous conference that, we would complain a lot and say, the first budget that gets cut is the research budget. They never cut advertising, because those guys are so cool, and that's not the truth. The problem is that I'm going to speak about qualitative research specifically because quant gives numbers and then gives scope. Yeah, scope. So that gives assurance. And I say to the industry that we must remember ultimately who our client is. We may say that we're reporting to insights departments, brands, and marketers, but we report to shareholders. And that is the truth of the matter. And what language do shareholders speak? We speak humanity. Yeah, we speak feelings, we speak psychology, consumer behavior. That's fantastic. Well done, Qualis. What does that mean for the shareholder, the ultimate boss? Shareholders speak money. Shareholders speak money, whether it's a little or whether it's a lot. So what we need to demonstrate with localization, with all these things that we're talking about, the importance of community and relationship and depth and cultural diversity, it's all beautiful. Translate that into money. So how does that translate into loyalty? What does loyalty look like in numbers? And when you have the numbers, you can equate that into money. Then that's how you motivate for the investment. We are not doing enough of that. And we think that it's not our job, and it is. We have to be able to say to the shareholders, this is the value of this investment. And yes, it's not a short-term investment, it's an investment in time, right? But this is what it's going to look like at this point in time. And that is the challenge for us researchers in staying relevant, in staying top of mind, and in staying in the partnership, because that 70% rejection is because we haven't gone far enough to speak to the shareholder who speaks money. We come in with an emotions perspective. We elevate consumer above business to somebody who speaks business. And that's why we get shut down.
Hopefully this talk would reach the shareholder, and then you would have done half the work for the local team the next time they try to convince them of something. But that is a really important conversation to have, to move away from just centrally being located around the consumer, but to be considerate of the business perspective as well. This has been great. I've certainly learned a lot. I'm sure that a lot of people have as well. Before we go, one of the things we like to do, Mpho, here at the IMM Friday Flash Talk is rate the consideration of what we're talking about within the marketing team. So where do you rate research and how it's considered? Is it more important, least important? I know you say that you think research gets cut first, but I don't think that's true. What's your true feeling of where it ranks in the marketing pyramid, so to speak?
It ranks first because it's the foundation. It literally is the foundation where everything is built. It's the springboard to how we build brands, to how we build marketing campaigns. It's the beginning.
You would say that because you're in research, but that's why we have Terasai here to tell us what the marketers really think about it and how important they really consider it. Terasai, what's your view?
No, it is number one because currently, there are a lot of pitfalls and a lot of mistakes that you can make purely because you didn't do research. We don't need to continuously reinvent the wheel sometimes. Sometimes we need to look at other people that have done the failures and made the mistakes, learn from those and leverage off them and make them better. And that can only be done if you do your research and you have sufficient case studies to justify that. So let's not always try to reinvent the wheel. Go back to your research, whether you're doing a campaign that has been done before, or whether you're doing a marketing strategy that has been done before. What were the learning curves when brand X went into that market? There is some research available around that you can use to guide your decisions. So research should be a fundamental key component of every marketer.
Thank you so much for your time. Before we go, let's get just the final view of what you think is important for marketers to take away from this conversation. Terasai, you can go first.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mpho, for joining us. It was very insightful. We appreciate it. And definitely, marketing research is number one. And we need to go back, not just to the heart from a qualitative point of view, but to really get to understand the preferences of each region and each market, understand the sales channels, the distribution, where you need to be spending your most amount of budget, because you can be continuously making certain pitfalls and investing in certain billboards or retail spaces that are no longer even relevant for your consumer, because you are not investing in current or present traditional understanding in terms of research of what is happening on the ground. So yes, there is a lot of digital information that we can get, but there is nothing that is more important currently than relationship and heart in any strategy.
Mpho, there's so much that that you've spoken about here, but if you think about marketers who have watched this conversation, if you want them to walk away with one thing top of mind when it comes to qualitative research within African perspective, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think the qualitative research really bridges the gap between great ideas in boardrooms that can be impactful or could completely fail with the person that it's intended for. And that bridging is important, because I think as brand owners or corporations, I think sometimes we get very caught up in our ideas and we think they're great, and they think, and and I know that there's sayings that the markets doesn't always know what they want. But I think it becomes really devastating when we are pulling products off the shelf. And qualitative research really streamlines that process to say, is this the right product for this market? How do you optimize it to make it even better, and to make sure that it results in the rands and cents of that bottom line? So when marketers really think about going into market, I think this is a key relationship that they need to have. And I think the industry has also not done enough. And at the Dare to Be Brave conference, I think the conference, what was beautiful was brands were saying, we need you as partners. We need you as partners, whispering in our ear, reminding us, and being the blind spots that we have, because sometimes you need that outside view. And that's what we are, that outside view with the consumer voice to say, hey, did you think about this?
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you to Mpho Mpofu, the founder of Masutane Consulting, for your incredible insights. It's been one of the more insightful ones, and I think that this year's IMM Friday Flash Talks have started on a really strong note with research as the core, and we hope to build on these discussions as we examine all of the trends. It's clear that as research develops, the way that brands roll out their campaigns will also develop, hopefully more localized campaigns that speak to communities and that are authentic. But thank you again, Mpho, for your time. Thank you also to Terasai for joining this conversation, your great insights, for helping us channel or navigate through what really is changing waters when it comes to launching campaigns. It's been a pleasure to host the IMM Friday Flash Talk. As usual, please do take part in this conversation. You can comment on it afterwards on social media pages, but also speak about it in the office, and take some of the insights you learn here and challenge people in the boardroom. They might be surprised at how progressive your thinking is. And you'll tell them it's because you watched the IMM Friday Flash Talk. Thank you from everyone at the Institute of Marketing Management.